Hello and welcome to Movie Buffs, a show where the action is the juice and where we live our lives a quarter mile at a time. I'm your host, Shani B. You can find me on all the socials at It's Me, Shani B.
And I'm your other host, Cisco from Misfit Minded. You can follow me on all the socials at misfit_minded and my website, misfitminded.com.
Each week, we take the red pill and use our certain set of skills to break down the best action films of all time. And today, we are talking about the 1999 film Fight Club.
How much can you know about yourself? You've never been in a fight.
From the director of Seven.
The first rule of Fight Club is do not talk about Fight Club. We gotta take Fight Club up a notch.
What did you guys do?
Without pain, we would have nothing.
What kind of sick game are you playing?
Brad Pitt.
We're not killing anyone, man. We're setting them free.
This is too much!
Edward Norton.
Something terrible is about to happen.
What did you expect?
Fight Club. Rated R.
Awesome. Okay, if you haven't seen it, it's about an insomniac office worker and a devil-may-care soap maker from an underground that form an underground fight club that evolves into much more. Thank you, IMDb, for that hilarious synopsis. To get this bullet train started, we'll take the listeners back to October 15th, 1999. It was made for $63 million, which is about double today, and it grossed $100 million, which is like $190 today. Which honestly, I thought it would have, I think I expected more, like every time I look at these numbers, I'm always like, damn, really? It did open at number one against The Story of Us, a weird family drama that I remember from back in the day. That was at number 3.
No clue.
It's not worth your time. Double Jeopardy was also in theaters at the time. That was number 2. Yes, hell yeah. Three Kings was there too. We might have to put that one on the list this year if we can squeeze it in. That was at number 4.
Clooney and Brad Pitt.
Hell yeah.
And the boxing they have a new movie coming out this week too.
Perfect. Yes. Okay. Also, what's his name? Jennifer Lawrence's favorite collaborator directed Three Kings. We got to see it. We got to do an O. Russell movie. There it is, David O. Russell.
We did a Luc Besson already, so I think we'll,
yeah, they're close.
Problematic filmmakers here, maybe. I don't know.
That's right. Yeah, we should really think about it. American Beauty at number 5.
Or speaking
of. Oh, yeah, another one. Superstar at number 6. And The Sixth Sense, that was in theaters for quite a while, at number 8. What a box office. What a crazy box office this is.
Definitely.
Yeah, that brings us to our first segment called Getting the Band Back Together.
I don't have friends. I got family.
In this segment, we take a slow motion look at the filmmaking choices that went into the film and all of the ass kickers responsible. Apologies for my voice ahead of time. I am still recovering from getting sick, so trying the best I can here. The movie was based on Chuck Palahniuk novel that I have read about 15 years ago though now, so it's been a while, and adapted for the screen by Jim Ulls, who also did Jumper, not much else besides those, and then David Fincher, who we talk about all the time on here,
one of our faves.
Seven, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Gone Girl, the list goes on and on. So
yes,
yeah, what do you think of the movie though, the filmmaking of it?
I think it stands, the test of time in terms of feeling recognizable as a Fincher movie, so much of that going into places where the camera doesn't usually go, throughout bombs, throughout walls, throughout, all kinds of internal pieces, which I really like. And the quick zoom of that and motion of that is good. I like the POV stuff. I don't always love a gray-green palette. That's very well documented here, but it really, like, watching this movie again and seeing that again, I was like, oh, I really do dig it here. Somehow this one does not, like, lull me any which way. It actually just kind of draws me in more. I like that score and how it kind of is, like, building with the story and with the relationship. Like this time in particular, I noticed the score starts really plain and simple, and it's like evolving and building, which is something I guess I hadn't thought of as, paying attention to scores in movies. So I really, really liked that. I guess like this is I don't have a lot of questions and plot holes just because I I'm like annoyingly into this movie.
Yeah.
But the weird AI looking animation sex scene is really interesting because I think in retrospect, maybe now I see it as like a part of his duality and the split identity. But it's just so like seeing that again, I'm always like, oh man, that one single shot like always creeps me out in a way I don't
Yeah.
love. But I
Because
really
yeah, it
go ahead, go
makes
ahead.
sense though. I mean, we're spoiling Fight Club by the way too, so if you haven't seen it,
Listen, you've
you
had
had
25
25
years.
years. Yeah. So, but it's interesting that a lot of the plot holes that you could come up with this movie, it's like you're dealing with a mentally ill person, you
Right.
know?
Exactly.
So, even that shot, like you're saying, he had never watched Brad Pitt have sex with her, you know, but that's what he think is happening. So he's having sex with her, picturing someone else having sex with her. So yes, that's a fucked up way of thinking of a physical act. You know what I mean? So it would be like this distorted kind of,
Yes.
picture of like, what should be just like sex, like a regular thing.
Right.
So yeah, I do like the choice though. I think it's like a lot of the things we'll get into in this movie, but I just like that they always take the more interesting, weird, unique, fucked up, whatever adjective you want to use,
Yes.
choice rather than let's just shoot a sex scene like we've seen a million times before, where the girl
Exactly.
the girl is on top and you can see her boobies jiggling up and down, or we can do this kind of like her blending into the walls and them kind of blending into each other kind of memory whole thing, and it's like, oh, that's kind of interesting actually.
It's true. It's like, we know the twist because we've seen this movie a bunch of times, but I feel like that's is one of the really genius ways that Fincher is trying to both tell you what's happening, but also keep the secret.
Yeah, and they do that constantly. Like it's one of those movies like, you mentioned The Sixth Sense was came out this year. This was actually
Mhm.
a time with like a lot of like twist ending movies weirdly.
Yeah.
Like The Usual Suspects was also like not the same year, but like a few years
It's around here.
before. And um I, and like The Matrix, it's not a twist ending, but it's like very twisty and it's like what is reality type of stuff too.
Totally.
Um I don't know, like, I always like revisiting this one just because, especially when it comes to like the twist, I do feel like some of those other ones, like I have gone back and watched like Usual Suspects since I knew the twist or whatever. I don't think
Mhm.
I've done that for Sixth Sense necessarily. I don't know. That's an interesting one. But
It's so good.
yeah, Usual Suspects. I went back and it's good, but like nothing kind of like captures that first time. You know what I mean? Kind of thing when you
Totally.
didn't know. And I do think like Fight Club is very unique in that like I've seen it like a million times, and every time I've watched it, it still is like as good as the first time, and it might even be better to be honest, because like once you go in knowing the twist, then you can see like the little like pop images of Brad Pitt of
Yeah, you
Tyler
start to look
Durden.
for those things.
Yeah, that like and like even the lines, it's like they really are telegraphing it so hard that like you feel stupid now, like when you watch it, because it's like, I don't know, I could just think of
How
like,
did I not see it?
Tyler would speak for me, or like I know this because Tyler knows this. And it's like
Mhm.
very on the nose, obvious, like being like, bro, these are the same person. Like,
But you never know, like,
but
is
you
that
don't.
about them having, being so the same person but different, the way that, like, other filmmakers get excited about adversarial characters, like the 2 characters in Heat, they're the
Yeah.
same person but different or not, and that's why I love the twist of this is that it's like, no, 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 they are literally the same person.
And I will say, like, I don't remember much about the book. I do remember, like, I saw the movie for the first time after I saw the book or read the book,
Mm,
and I was like, okay, that this movie's definitely better than the book. And like Chuck Palahniuk has definitely like said that too. Like it took the
mm,
idea and elevated it. But I will say that like all of that dialogue is like straight up from the book, like the lines of the narrator, and I
it's
like
very
it
cool.
makes it like very interesting to read, and like and Like, just that I think, like, the first time you watch it, I think that's kind of, like, the disarming element of it is like, "Ooh, that's, like, a weird way to say that," you know? Like,
Yeah.
or, like, a lot of the secretness of, like, around Fight Club and the club, like, you can think of that as, like, a plot hole, like, how does, no
Yeah,
one
how can
know?
it grow so big, but it's a secret?
Yeah, but, like, again, this is a guy who's playing a trick on himself, you know what I mean? Like, so it's like, he's believing it, so, like, then we're believing it, and so it's like, but it does make you question, like, a lot of, as you watch it over and over again, the different characters, like who they're talking to, like, is he talking to himself in the scene, or is he like
Right.
just, or is there just silence where Brad Pitt is talking and he is just talking to no one? It's like it
Yes.
really. I was thinking of that. I think of that a lot especially like in the car crash scene where he's having
Mm,
this argument with Brad Pitt and there's three people in the back, and I'm like, what are
yeah.
they hearing? Like, what is he doing both monologues to himself, or
Same.
like, but because you can't ask questions in Project Mayhem, they just blindly follow. So it's,
That's
again,
right.
it's this movie that's like infinitely, to me, I think is interesting, where like every scene is subject to like reevaluation. 25 years later, we can talk about it and think, what do you think?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and think about kind of like what it says about, the themes of this movie and these types of men, because I was thinking about that so much too of like, when he's going in and out of the house, since it's just him and it's like Tyler coming out and saying one thing to these guys when they're waiting on the porch and then him
Yes, I
coming
love
out
that.
like,
That's the other scene I was thinking of too, like, especially with Bob, because Brad Pitt tells Bob off right away, "You too fucking fat, your tits are too big, get out of
yeah,
here." And then Edward Norton comes around the corner and is like, Bob, wait." And it's like, did he said both of those things to Bob? Like, Bob must be like, "This guy's a nut job."
Yes, yes. This time in particular, I was thinking so much about how it like says a lot about how a lot of men's organizations end up being about a brotherhood that has to do with like being really abusive and accepted, like
Yeah.
treating people like complete trash, but then being like, but I love you, you're my brother. And
Mhm.
that like it makes me really sad that these guys who are really lost and looking for acceptance, like, are kind of subject to that. They do some bad stuff, so I can't super defend them or whatever, but it did make me feel like, this poor guy is just looking for a kind of acceptance, and what he has to put up with in order to get that acceptance is really sad.
Yeah, I think that's like a good segue to like talk about, just like the toxicity of this movie, because
Mm.
even admitting that you like this movie is like, oh, you're a film bro and blah blah blah. And it's like,
Yeah.
so I guess like one part of it is like, yes, like there was a toxic portion of largely male audiences that took the wrong things from this movie, tried to copy Fight Clubs and like start their own, and like that is not what, the movie I think is trying to say,
No.
and it's not like what I especially like take from this movie. I'm right with you, what you just said. I think like the whole Tyler persona, he kills Tyler at the end. And I feel like I constantly have to say this with some of these movies, because like it's almost like people like willfully ignore or fall asleep during the third act, because like
Right.
you run into this again with like Wolf of Wall Street or Goodfellas or whatever, and it's just like they're like, yeah, but he's propping up these characters. I'm like, what happens to them at the end? Like, I just want people to ask, what
Yes.
happens to these main characters that you think are like being put on this pedestal? Wolf of Wall Street, Belfort ends up in jail. He's pathetic. He's a loser. Goodfellas,
Yes.
Henry Hill's a schmuck. He says that himself. And then
Yep.
this one, Tyler is dead, and you can interpret that whichever way you want,
Yeah, the
but
narrator's ready to let go of that identity, does not
yeah.
need it.
But this toxic character that he thought he needed of himself, like, and I guess that's my big takeaway and why I love the film, like from, when I was a teenager to like now, is like, I just think that message is like very powerful, that like, you shouldn't just follow a leader, even if he looks like Brad Pitt and he's saying all these charismatic things, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
you see what happens, like how I like, and people complain about the third act of this movie too, but like, I think it's important because it's like it becomes this paranoid thriller
Mhm.
where Edward Norton is like the narrator. We'll call him Jack if we can agree to that, because
Yeah, that sounds good.
even in like the special features, that's what they label him as in the.
Yeah, and when he's,
So
like, sort of reading those books and
yeah,
and kind of adopting that identity as well.
yeah. So like Jack is like the only like he's waking up from this like this bad nightmare or whatever that he's having, and
Mhm.
because Tyler has made all of these people buy into his bullshit, he's having to like basically fend for his life like in the third act. And so it's like it's not just saying like yeah, yeah, obviously there's some points in there that are super extreme, and like that's by design, but like it does kind of shock me like that reading like some of the reviews at the time, and even like now, that call it like a fascist film, or it's extreme, it's pornographic. It's just like it's like I don't buy that at all. I don't feel those type of things at all when I don't feel,
It's almost a satire on those
yes,
things.
very hardcore. I think like because
Yes.
there's this like really dry sense of humor to it, like from the every like side character. Like there's this like ridiculous like I laugh now when I watch like the guy at the airport who's like, yeah, the throwers, he's like, thrower baggage handlers, yeah, and he's like
Yes.
and he's like doing all this like business like logo around a dildo. Like there is these like ridiculous like corporate business talk, that happens. So it's like it is satire of like office culture, of masculine culture. These two guys, you think this is what they're saying, like this is what masculinity should be, two guys in this shitty drug house, like
Seriously.
that have some homoerotic like fixations on each other, like to be
Mhm.
real, like I don't think that's what they're saying, like this is what the peak male form is like supposed to be like. It's again, it's satirizing it. These are real feelings that maybe men have, but it's kind of digging into like, why are we feeling that, what is the reason for it, why do we
Yes.
look into these like leaders like we do. And I just, yeah, people, I think, for whatever reasons they like dismiss that, or have their
Yeah,
own
like
agendas with
when
it.
you're
But
lost and you're trying to figure out who you are, weirdly, the way that men are depicted finding themselves is often through misogyny and violence.
violence,
And yeah,
yeah.
like that's just like it is a disservice to men that those are the only mechanisms to do it. And that's why I do think this movie, the satire is really poignant, because I feel like when Edward Norton's character, when Jack really feels a sense of grounding and like he can have a kind of acceptance without those things, he obviously actively fights against them, but he's not alone in being a man who's lost and needs connection and wants to feel like they're seen.
And I love like, and that was from the book too. I remember just like even before the Fight Club, that like he takes on this, again, kind of hinting that he's playing these other characters, that he goes to these other support groups and he like
Yes.
puts on these fake names, and it's like it really doesn't matter what the club is. He's just looking for a club and someone to hug and to cry on. You
He
know what I
wants to
mean? Like,
feel like he exists, and
yeah,
in these places where people are vulnerable and emotional, they see him, they
yeah,
listen to him. Like, I love that line that Marla has when she's like, not like people are just waiting for their turn to
mm,
talk,
yeah.
right? And I do feel like, men are not necessarily allowed to go to a support group because they feel lonely, but, if they're dying of something, if whatever's going on, then it's fair game.
Yeah, and like that's again where some of the other like humor I think comes across is in that first section a lot, because
Yes.
it's like and especially like how unreliable this guy is, because he gets so mad when Marla comes, and it's like, dude, you're doing the same shit. Like, how are
That's
you mad?
right.
This girl is just doing the same stuff as you. Like, I
She's
like
just like
when
you.
he says that to her, I'll expose you. She's like, I'll expose you. Like, like,
Right.
what are we doing here? So
And
I
she's
don't know.
kind of blatantly sort of being like, I think these people might even know, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're
Oh, for
going to,
sure. She walks into
yeah,
testicular cancer, and then like there's one line where he's like, "I knew she was fake. Like she came into my sickle cell group, and it's all black people in there."
Yeah,
It's like,
right,
it's
exactly.
like, bro, yes, people know that you two are not, and they don't care. Like it's just, oh my god,
Yeah, they
it's
don't
so
have the
funny.
time to try to figure out why you're here, but there is more space, and that I think that's the interesting thing about this is like wanting to feel like you exist and trying on all kinds of identities in your life to find a level of existence. I think that's like a very human story.
Yeah.
It's just they're able to amplify that kind of like through this unique, men's club and violence and thing and
And it's
uh,
just that Brad Pitt, like Tyler Durden was just like the loudest voice, or the voice that he literally blew up his apartment,
right.
to get his attention, to isolate him. You know what I mean? And like you
Mhm.
see some of these extreme cult leaders, like they'll find people at their most vulnerable, their most like financially, you know
Always.
what I mean? So it's like
Yep.
it really does check out that like you could assume that the narrator would have been doing fine with just these support groups. Maybe he could have had like a normal relationship with
Yep.
Marla, but
You
like,
might have.
but this other alter ego kind of like took over, and kind of altered the trajectory. But
Yeah, he needed to be special in some
yeah,
way, and I think Marlo was always sort of challenging that it's like, you're not the only person who feels like they're not seen, and
yeah,
so he had to kinda go the other way because I feel like, all cult leaders are always like, "It's groupthink that's the problem, man," and then they just get you
yeah,
to do their
exactly.
groupthink, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much like, I don't like, again, you could say it's satire, but just like irony in some of the Tyler comments. I mean, like one of my favorite ones is like when they're looking at the Calvin Klein like underwear ad, and he's like, "Is that what a real man is supposed to look like?" And then like literally the next shot is Brad Pitt with like fucking the perfect chiseled 8-pack abs like fighting, and it's like, what are you talking about? Like what?
Right, right, and, like, to this day,
Yeah.
every personal trainer is like people still come in
Yes.
being like, "I'm trying to look like Brad Pitt in Fight
Yeah,
Club."
exactly. So it's easy to point out. I'll free run through these like filmmaking things, and because I do want to
Please.
talk about the performances, but I think one of the things I think that makes the twist still like really work too is just like all of the other. It's like a magic trick. I was thinking about this. It's like it's so kinetic, the pace, the editing, the camera's always moving, the characters are always moving. You really don't have any time to like stop and think about what's going on. You're
No.
just like kind of carried along. And so like I really think like as far as like the editing goes, like that really helps it. And then that to add to that, like the VFX, I think are like still really impressive. Like, in 99 there was like it's like this turning point of like, oh, we can do like whole scenes where we don't need any like practical elements whatsoever. Like we can
Totally.
full CG. So like, that you talked about it, the pilot light explosion in the apartment, the garbage can,
Yeah.
with all these like pieces, even the like opening credits where it's like taking you through his brain and like the sweat and
Yes.
everything. Like it's all these things that like you would never, you know, decades prior in film, like we wouldn't be able to capture that on film, like, but really expanding that. I like the narration, and that goes with like the fourth wall breaking, speaking directly into the camera.
Yeah.
The fact that like Tyler works at a movie theater, like setting up that like he is like an editor and a director. He's in the one in control. He can cut in
Mhm.
these segments of porn into kids' movies.
So good, so funny.
And and that's kind of like, some of the pranks early on, I'm like, all right, I'm kind of on board with what he's doing. Like there's some of these harmless pranks, but then it
Right.
definitely leaps to like another level. Like when you're pissing in people's soup and stuff, it's like, okay, all right, it's
Yeah, now you're, like, just being an asshole,
yeah.
you know what I mean? You're claiming everyone else is an asshole, but you're really doing some dickish shit.
And they really like, again, with the editing, it's like they're playing with, POV a lot too, because like, at first, again, it's really smart because you think like, oh, he has insomnia, so of course, like he's waking and falling asleep, and
Yeah, and
you don't
losing
know
touch with
what's
time.
real. Yeah, so like, and then even when Tyler, like his introduction, he's telling the story to this lady on the plane of his job, and then like he loses some time, he wakes up, and then instead of that lady, he's sitting next to Tyler, and like you never see Tyler walk in, it's like he's just there, Tyler.
Yeah, yeah. Dressed like a hilarious used car salesman.
In the red leather, and they really like you put him in the most ridiculous like outfits too
Very
in the movie
flamboyant.
too. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we kind of already talked about the twist, but I don't know. I do think it's like one of those twists that still lives on, and like people really, it's a good twist and people like preserve it. I feel like because like there's some that just like people just feel a certain way, but it's like, oh, you haven't seen Fight Club? Oh, okay, I won't spoil it. I won't spoil it. It's
Totally.
like they really protect the like, don't talk about Fight Club. Let people experience it. Like one of those
Yes.
things. I think that's one of my favorite parts of like showing this movie to people too. Is just like it's really fun. I remember I showed it to my youngest brother like a few years ago, and like he had he did no idea, when it got to
That's
he's like,
awesome.
what?
Yes.
And I was like, dude, now you know how I felt like the first time.
That's so awesome.
So I love like passing that on, and it's again, it's even compared to some of those other twists, it's like I do think like this one's like such a mind blower where you're just like, what? Like, so like
Yeah.
some of this just hasn't been real. Like we've been lied to. Like, but
Yeah.
it's presented in such a way that you're not feel cheated. You're just like, oh, this guy is really like more sick than we originally thought, I guess.
Yes. Yes. This guy needs help.
Yeah. And Marla says that to him, which like if a girl like Marla is saying that to you,
Right. You know it's serious.
So let's get into some of these characters in our next segment called Choose Your Fighter.
Welcome to the party, pal.
In this segment, we will check out all the bros and babes that flex their acting muscles and sometimes their real muscles for us, movie buffs. This film stars Edward Norton, Helena Bonham Carter, Jared Leto's there, Meatloaf is there, and of course, Brad Pitt.
Oh yeah. Um yeah, I mean, oh god, there's so many good actors in this. I think, that's another thing that like really sells the twist of it is like everyone just feels like a very unique character in this, like their own person.
Yep.
I definitely, when I was like a teenager, like I thought Ed Norton was like the best actor ever.
That's
I
awesome.
don't know. He legit was like every movie I saw him in, I'm like, oh, is this my new favorite movie? Like this movie, I was like,
He is
and
very good.
Primal Fear, Fight
Oh,
Club, American History X, like
ugh.
and they were just he would just find I don't know if it was like him finding the right scripts, but he just find these like such these crazy scripts that you were like
Mm-hmm.
not forget and you just want to watch over and over again.
Totally a chameleon, like
Yeah.
none of these guys are like the same guy, but they're all
No.
pretty fucked up in different
Yes.
ways.
Yeah, because it's like you watch like he's the perfect person for the narrator, just like this
Yes.
average Joe American office worker bee. And then you watch American History X and he's like this buffed out like
Total
Nazi.
psychopath.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And
I
you're
mean,
like,
like,
how is this the same guy?
right. And all three of those characters, like Primal Fear, American History X, and here
Yeah.
are all like lost young men
Yeah.
who've been abused by other men in
Yes.
one way or another. So
Mhm.
there's not a lot of there's not a huge amount of abuse taking place in this film, but he is talking about the strange dynamic he had with his father and sort of
Mhm.
like maybe the abuse of neglect. That like neglect is like a little talked about one, but it's like a form of psychological abuse that really fucks people up.
Yeah, like I really like that scene when like the scene you're talking about where like Brad Pitt is in the
When he's in the bath.
bathtub and
Yeah.
and Ed Norton is like brushing his teeth and they're just talking about their dads, two bros just talking about their dads and like
Yep.
again, Edward Norton, he would do this all the time. He would start a family, then move to a different city and start a new family. Then Brad Pitt's like,
Fucking wild.
fucker setting up franchises.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and they're both just sort of being like, same,
Yeah, I was
like,
gonna say Edward Norton says it a lot where he's just like, "That sounds familiar," or like,
yep, yep. And that's exactly it, right? Like these are men who have no one they can talk about their pain with. And so it makes sense that if you were to meet a person like Tyler or have a person in his identity that was like Tyler who could experience what he's experienced but have turned it around and have not let it
yeah,
implode in him, that he could feel better about it. So
And you
it's
see some of that
interesting.
misogyny in there too, where he's just like, we're raised by women, we're children raised by women. I'm wondering if there's a woman's another thing we need, like that type of.
Mhm.
So again, and again, you hear that kind of rhetoric too, like from these different like online celebrities and
Yes.
podcasters now. I guess would be like the new Tyler Durden's. I'm trying to
Yep.
think of like what would be like the modern equivalent.
I know, yeah,
Um,
I guess, like, not maybe Joe
like
Rogan's
Andrew
not the best
Tate,
one,
or
but
I don't know.
but, like, these dudes that are like, "You gotta take it
It
up
kind of is
yourself," or
though, because Joe
whatever
Rogan, like, there's even that like UFC element, that like ultimate fighting.
vibe.
This is how, and I don't know.
It's true. It's a complex thing, but it's interesting because like in movies with misogyny at the center, they're always looking to blame something else, something outside of them.
Yeah,
Like Edward Norton is not willing to be accountable for the fact that like if he's unhappy in his job, he can fucking apply for another job. If
yeah.
he's unhappy with the way his life is going, he can make choices to change it. But instead, he's sort of like society doesn't care about me. Other people
Hmm.
don't care about me. It's very self-centered without
Yeah.
acknowledging that.
And it's like, and there are some points that Tyler makes where it's like, yeah, like that is kind of true, which like a good cult leader does do that. Like there'll be like
Of course.
these semi true stories where it is pathetic that Edward Norton is being like, that furniture made me. It's like that is fucking sad, dude. Like
Totally.
that is,
Totally.
the fact that you just said that with a straight face is like, I understand why Brad Pitt was laughing at you and like,
Yep.
and you felt the need to blow it everything up. It's like, but there's a reasonable like, all right, maybe I need to chill out on spending, or
Well, and also, when you're designing your home, you should design it with things that make you feel reflected. That's the
yeah,
difference is that like those are not authentic reflections of him, which is why it's easy for Brad Pitt to poke holes in it. Whereas
yeah,
like, at my house, I got posters that are my favorite
right,
movies, so they
exactly,
reflect me.
right, exactly.
And that's the difference is like he didn't have a real unique identity, and rather than kind of challenging himself to really determine like who he is and what he actually values, his personality split and his values became extreme instead of grounded.
Yeah. I also love that like that scene where again with the VFX where it's like he's walking through his apartment and all of the titles of the
I love
catalog
that.
are popping up.
So good. Yeah, like the
uh,
cost, the name,
yeah. And then you
like a
see
Sims episode or something.
like the yin yang table like on the ground like as all of his furniture is exploded out of on the
Another
street.
perfect thing, right? Like
Yeah.
looking for that balance has to have some dark and some light?
Yeah. Yeah, he's like, what's more depressing? A fridge full of condiments and no food.
So good.
There's some stuff is like too relatable. I don't know with the narrator where it's like, I know you shouldn't relate to this guy, but any guy in their 20s or 30s, there's a reason why it kind of, you know, it kind of
Yes.
elevates to us.
I think everybody has a period in their life where they feel a little bit lost, a little out of touch with like who they're going to be, if
Yeah.
they're going to be important, what's going to make them feel like they're satisfied or that they're worthwhile. I think that's like a human thing, which is,
Mhm.
one of the reasons why cult leaders are so successful a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But also why this movie is something that like even, like gals like me are into, regardless of some of the other pieces that I, don't love, but I can still understand.
Hmm. Yeah, let's talk about Brad Pitt too, like who is,
The
I would
king, man.
say, the epitome of cool in this. You
Seriously.
know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and also like anyone that tries to deny that Brad Pitt is like a handsome guy, which I don't know you would do that.
Yeah,
Like
what the hell is wrong with you if you
they
do
put
that?
him in the most outrageous suits that like and outfits that anyone else tries to put on,
Yes,
they would look absolutely terrible, and for some reason Brad Pitt pulls it off. It's it's kind
he
of
really
amazing
can.
actually. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
he has like, I was kind of like trying to write them down this time, but like, there's one scene he has like jogging pants and like a dress shirt on. And like I was like, and somehow he's pulling that off.
Yes,
There's
yes,
what was another one? He has like a fur coat on and those like kind of thick
yes, those
glasses at the end.
glasses. Yup. A tank, like a hilarious tank that's like sort of tie-dye or something.
Yeah.
It's true. He's such
That
a
pink
good
robe, that might
example.
be my favorite one. The pink robe that he wears.
Oh
He's
my
like
god.
not wearing anything underneath, but it just has like coffee mugs
Yeah,
on
it
it.
like looks like a robe straight out of the Friends franchise, like as if he was like, "Oh, I just got this from Friends and now I'm wearing it here." But I feel like that's exactly right. Is like he is the best actor to choose for a
Yeah.
man who no matter what he does, he's accepted. He's cool. No matter what he
Mhm.
says or does, you're like, "That's awesome, man." Like he
Yeah.
truly is that actor. I feel like Clooney's a version of that, but nobody is better at it than Brad Pitt.
No. Yeah, and, like, I just their scenes together, like, him and Norton, I think their chemistry is, like, really, really
Very
strong.
good.
You really believe that they have this friendship, like, especially
Yes.
early on, like, you're like, "Oh, yeah, Brad Pitt would" like, they call it Riz or whatever now, but it's like, he
Yes,
would
he does
definitely
have
Riz
it.
you into a friendship, as a dude, like, so
Yeah, you would let
easy.
him be incredibly abusive to you if it meant he was
Yeah.
gonna like you as well.
Like,
Mhm.
even that I was thinking of, like, on the plane when, like, Ed Norton's trying to be, like, all smooth, and he's trying to have his own, like, conversation, and Brad Pitt's just like, "Yeah, it's kinda clever," or whatever. He's just like,
Yeah.
How's that working out for you?"
Yeah, how's that going? Mhm.
Or, it is kinda just yeah, he's just calling out bullshit, you have a pathetic nature to your laugh or whatever he says. You have a sick desperation in your laugh.
Yep.
And then like after the apartment explosion, and he's like pushing him. You see him like the from the very beginning, he's pushing back a little, and then he keeps raising the stakes on like how he's pushing him. But like early on, it's just like in conversation, 3 pitchers of beer, you can't ask, like
Yep. Yep.
what are you talking about? You call me because you needed a place to stay. Still can't ask. Would
Yeah,
it
just
hurt?
do it.
Would it hurt for
Right.
you to ask? Like, it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah, it's like you almost need somebody to be adversarial to
yeah.
challenge you to ask for what you want instead of, again, just
The
like
yin and
having
yang.
the
Yin
resilience,
and
you know?
yang.
Yes, yes, it's true. And,
Um,
also I feel like that's like Helena Bonham Carter is such a unique person to be in this, to be like the third piece of this triangle
mhm.
because
Love
she is
triangle.
just like Edward Norton and Brad Pitt. She's like if
Yeah,
those two things were something that he embodied all the time and walked around as, she
yeah,
really represents maintaining that balance of like I can be soft, but I'm also a total psychopath.
yeah.
Like such an authentic kind of manic pixie dream girl, like what
Mhm,
that girl would
definitely.
really be like, you
Oh,
know?
for sure. Like,
Um,
it's not the
and she's
Hollywood
just
version. Like,
yes, exactly. Like how whack it would be to meet a girl like that in real life.
yeah.
And I just kind of love her as this thing where it's like she's not here to fix him, she's not here to save him, she's not here to be the thing that helps him realize what's going on. She's just here to like be a reflection of him.
Mhm,
And, he needs as many reflections as possible by the end of this movie to see himself finally.
mhm. Yeah, I think her character in particular is probably the one that's, like, changes the most for me, like, the more I
Mm,
watch it, where it's
okay.
like, just because, like, the first couple times because you're following the narrator, you're just like, "Man, like, this chick sucks. She's the worst," you
She's
know?
weird as hell,
The one
man.
the one that because he's telling you that, like,
Yeah,
where she's just like, "And then Marla came," and you get the dramatic music, like, comes in, and that's when everything fell apart and blah, 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 and,
right.
you know
Just like a dude to try to blame this chick, right?
exactly, and then the more you watch it though, right, you're just like, "This is just a
You're
chick
actually
she's"
fucking her life up,
yes,
guy.
like, she's pretty attractive, she seems into you for whatever reason, like,
Right, it's truly
uh,
shocking.
and you're just fucking pissing it away because of why, like, you're just giving her the cold shoulder because this stranger is coming into your world or whatever, and it's just like, alright, well, who cares, like, there's definitely some misogyny, I think, there, where it's just like, I don't even think if you asked him why, like, if Brad Pitt ever came in and was like, "Why do you not like her?" I don't think he would be able to tell you, like, a good reason,
And I
like
think it's because she reflects him, right? Like
yeah,
he wants to be reflected by someone like Brad Pitt because he thinks of someone like Brad Pitt as like better than him. I think it's like
yeah,
that trophy wife kind of dynamic of like dudes who are like, this girl's perfectly nice. She likes me. She treats me well. She makes me feel seen, but she's not like hot. So I can't
mm,
be with her. And I
mhm.
feel like that's sort of like the role that Marla is playing in
Well,
his
he
life
says
is that
I'll
like,
say he has one line actually, and I'm thinking
mm,
about it now, where he says, "I can't I can't cry in here if I know there's another faker present. And so then that's why they split up the weeks or whatever. And
Right.
so it's like, okay, that could have been, but then y'all could have like, had a date or something. You know what I mean? Like it did
That's
not have to
exactly
be
it.
this like adversarial, let's not make a big thing out of it. He's just like such a dick to her, and
It's
like
honestly because he hates himself. Like, his
yeah.
self-loathing, he projects it all onto her as if
Yeah,
she's
oh
the
yeah, that's
bad
right.
one.
He's probably looking at her like, "Damn, this is how pathetic I look," like
Yeah, I
this is
certainly can't accept love from that, place. I need it
Yeah.
from the cool place because I wanna imagine myself as cool and a good
But I
person.
think that would be my challenge to anyone that it's been a while since they've seen this movie is try to watch this movie through Marla's eyes because I think you'll change your if you're kind of like, well, I remember her being kind of terrible and that like please do that because
Yeah,
like yes, she has
she
her
deserves
own
it.
problems or whatever. She definitely needs professional help as well,
Yes.
but like yeah, definitely like probably the most well-adjusted character in this movie, and that's saying
At
something.
least being honest, right? At
Yeah.
least being honest about who she is.
Yeah, I love that line because like she's stealing, she's, five finger
Yeah,
discount all the time, but like,
right.
when he called her on it with the food or whatever, and he's like, "Oh, are you delivering that to Susan or whatever?"
Yeah, I almost feel like because she embodies the dual identity that he's going to have a split relationship to, that maybe she even triggers that in him. Like
Yeah.
that she shows him that she can both be at this support group, like being like, no, I need to feel seen because I don't
Mhm.
want people to just be waiting for their turn to talk either. But then she's stealing, which is something Tyler would do. So
Yeah.
it's sort of like
Yeah,
I
it's like
almost feel
she
like
she
she
would
might.
be invited to Project Mayhem, I feel like, if they
Yes.
let her, you know what I
Yes.
mean? But I love
Yeah, it
that
was
line
like
where she's like, "Susan's dead and I'm living and I'm in poverty."
yes,
It's like,
yes.
that's
She's just
it.
like Brad Pitt, right?
Yeah, it's
Yes,
like,
yes. It
oh
reminds me
man.
a lot of like the cult leader episode of It's Always Sunny in like the later season when
Oh
Mac is
yeah.
like, "It was never supposed to be for women, dude." Like that's how it kind of feels sometimes. But I
Uh,
do feel like on this rewatch, I was like, oh, she's so activating to him because she is too much of a mirror. She is
yeah.
the Tyler
He's
Durden
pushing
mirror,
his
and she's
buttons in some
also the Jack
scenes, but
mirror.
again, it's like you don't have to react in anger to that. It's like she definitely like it could have been a
Oh,
flirty thing, it could have been fun, but
no, I mean, like, that's exactly it, people always are working against themselves when they're not willing
yeah.
to when they're too ashamed of who they are, and I
Mm.
do feel like that's something that Helena Bonham Carter is, like, really able to nail is that she's like, "I'm experiencing deep despair and depression and self-loathing, but I'm also not trying to hide that. I'm also not pretending that isn't happening to
I will
me,"
say,
and Edward
yeah,
Norton's really pretending it's not or wanting to hope it's not.
I know because we gotta like, watch for time. I just want to. I'm gonna put it here because I know I'm gonna forget if we don't
Mm,
come to it later. But my favorite piece of trivia about this movie has to do with Marlo's character.
nice.
So Fincher always has issues with censors and studios. We know this.
Of course.
Censors had a really big issue with the violence in here, but then there was one line in particular. They're like, "You got to change it. You got to take it out." Um, and it was a line after Brad Pitt and her have sex, and she says, "Well, I'll tell you. I'll tell you that the original version was,
Okay.
I want you to have my abortion." Was the line.
Wow. Okay.
Okay? And
Okay.
I can't remember if it was the censors or 20th Century, but they're like, "You have to change it."
Yeah,
And
someone was
so
like, "We can't
this
let
is
that
this is
one
where
in."
Fincher's genius comes in. He says, "I will change it on the condition that whatever I change it to, you cannot that is it.
That's
That
gotta
is
be it.
this
Okay.
is gonna be," and they're like, "All right." So then what we get is what's in the movie where she says, "I haven't been fucked like that since grade school."
Exactly. Yes, another fantastic, like, warped ass line that speaks to, the people who feel this way have experienced some form of
And I
abuse.
just
It's
love that
subtle, but it's there.
because I know they were laughing. I listened to the commentary with Fincher and Pitt and Norton, and they're like just cracking up the whole way. But they were just saying like they begged him to change it back to the first verse. And you can watch the original line. They shot it and everything. And
Okay.
he was like, "No, we agreed.
We made this
This is the
agreement.
line, and that's what you got to do with
That's it. I'm holding you to your word. That's amazing. Wow. Wow, that's
Oh, it's
awesome.
so great. And that's kind of the dark humor too to this too. Like this is not like, definitely not like a one you should watch as a kid. Like I think I saw it at the perfect time, as a
Totally.
teenager. It's definitely like when you're starting to question things and things like that in
Yeah, try when
20s and
you're
30s.
trying to find yourself, you
Yeah,
know?
definitely.
Nice, nice. All right. That brings us to our next segment called The Need for Speed.
Pain don't hurt.
In this segment, we do what the Oscars don't, honor the amazing stuntmen and women for their death-defying work and pick out the punch that knocked us out the most. What do you got, Shani B?
All right. I honorable mention the airplane crash. It's pretty dope, not quite as dope as Final Destination, but still up there.
It's still
Um,
pretty crazy, right? I think that's a pretty great. Like I remember, I'll just say this too, like that. I remember, like, do you remember the commercials? Some of those studios used to have where they just like cut together their best clips and stuff.
yes. Oh, I
They
loved those.
They had that scene, I remember for a long time, like they were advertising like this was our movie, that had this airplane, I
Yeah,
remember seeing like before I'd even seen Fight Club, I had seen that clip like a number of times.
of course.
Just in that.
Yeah, I just like it because it's sort of like, alluding to this fantasy, this like, idea of that he can imagine these things, and I like
Mhm.
that a lot. I really like when he beats himself up to secure some salary via blackmail,
Mhm.
and he kind of recalls like, in that scene, he even says, "It felt
Another
like my
line.
first fight with Tyler," and it's like,
Yep.
yeah, because it was exactly the same.
And I
So
love the
good.
freeze frame. He's in the air as he uppercuts himself, and then that line
Yes.
drops. It's like the perfect edit
Yeah,
for that.
so good. I also I like the car crash you mentioned too, because I feel like, that mental significance of like what's happening mentally in his mind as he deteriorates, and then like a literal crash is taking place because
Yeah,
these two things are colliding. And I think my favorite though is when he like nearly beats Leto to death.
yeah.
It's so hardcore. And I feel like, it's a much better example of like Leto really could have claimed he forgot this movie over urban legend because his face was nearly beaten in.
Isn't that the
Um,
most random? Like, remember we talked about that? Like,
of
why
course,
does he deny
I
he's
have
in
to bring it
Urban
up every chance
Legend?
I get. He's such an idiot for that.
God, that's a pretty good
um,
movie, bro. Like,
Yeah.
you don't
I
have
mean,
to.
he's in this. He's not a huge significant part in this, but something that stands out to me like about that instance is in some way because he doesn't understand that he and Tyler are the same person. He beats Leto to death because he thinks that he's in competition with him because he sees that, Tyler sees him as as something special
Yeah, I wanted
when they
to
do
destroy
that
something
banquet.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's so funny because then from the other side of that, like we were talking about at the top, it's sort of like, what the hell is a character like Leto supposed to believe? This man is like pulling him close in and being
yeah.
like, "Great job, dude," and then almost killing him.
Yeah,
Like,
that's like a weird
shocking.
one too because it's like you would think, and they kind of allude to that like Marla and Tyler's relationship is like going to cause him to do something out of revenge or something, right? Because he's feeling alienated. And
Yep.
then I do think that the Leto thing probably has something to do with that, where he's like, I can't take my anger out on her because she's a
Right.
woman the way
Right.
that we have in Fight Club. So I'm just gonna go with the next best thing, which is Jared Leto.
Yes, which is the beautiful face of Jared
Yeah.
Leto.
And this is also part of my conspiracy that like Fincher secret low key hates Leto or something because if you remember Panic Room, he
Oh, I
fucks him
do.
up too in
He
there.
does. Yeah, he really loves to fuck up Jared Leto. He really does.
Which as a viewer, I also like to see that too. I don't know why, but
Same. Same.
there
I'm
is
into it.
something pleasurable about that.
It's true. You
Uh,
wanna see Leto get his. You definitely do.
um
What about you? Yeah, what are your favorite stunts?
Number 3, I love the scene where Lou meets Tyler and instantly regrets it for trying to test
Yes.
it.
He's, like, laughing.
Yeah, like, and just the way he's just like, it's like this. He's like in another movie. He's just like this old like '90s gangster, '80s gangster or something. And he's like, "There's a sign out there that says Lou. I'm fucking Lou. Who the fuck
Yeah,
are
what the
you?"
hell? Yes, yes.
And Tyler just instantly, just calling bullshit, on him, and then just fucking bleeds all over his face. It's just so disgusting.
Yes.
This is
So
what
good.
does he say? He's just like, I need this, Lou. Please let us use it.
Yes. I mean, he's destroying another masculine archetype. He's saying, like,
Yeah,
even the mobster, the one that we're so afraid of,
yeah.
Tyler has a way of castrating that guy.
Yeah. Um, and yeah, just instantly, it's like one of those unforgettable scenes where it's
It's so good.
out of all the violent scenes, that might be the one that I mean, there's a guy that throws up in during that scene, one of the ranch
Yeah.
guys, and it's like I don't think they have a reaction like that during any of the fights, you know. So
No.
it's like I just had to mention that.
So good.
I love the yeah. I'll put like the airplane crash, like you said, like the VFX. I think are so cool, and
So good.
his line, where, I always hope that happens because life insurance pays triple. And it's just like such again, a very dark, like line, like,
Mhm.
but I guess like that's kind of his job too. So like maybe he would just be thinking about death and collisions all the time. And,
Absolutely.
and I guess I'll go with number one, the lie scene, the chemical burn.
Pretty nasty.
It's pretty gross. I really like the editing in that scene too, where he keeps trying to like go to his happy place, and Brad Pitt's just smacking the shit out of him. No, don't
Right?
deal with it like those other dudes too. Like,
Don't use any healthy form
yeah.
of emotion regulation. Come here to violence.
And I guess my favorite one in that is when he's like, I try not to think of words like sear, and it shows the dictionary word of like sear in the dictionary.
Yes.
It's like, again, those specific touches is why I go back to Fight
So
Club. It's just
thoughtful.
so visually interesting, and like full of these like little touches that only Fincher and company could produce. So yeah.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
And then it comes back to like where all the other people have the burn. Marla
Yep.
questions him about it. Who did this to you? Was it a guy or a girl? He's like, why do you care?
Right. Well, I mean, it's in the shape of a kiss, right?
Yeah,
Because it's
exactly.
the chemical is reacting to human saliva.
hmm And that brings us to our next segment called Death Proof.
If he dies, he dies.
This is where we'll take a look at the movie's body count and see who bit the dust the hardest. Not a lot of deaths here, so
No.
I'm sure we'll be talking about the
Yeah.
same ones. Go for it.
Have to shout out. We didn't talk about Meatloaf, but I think he's actually great in this movie.
I knew we would get there.
Yeah, I love him as he seems like he's probably the first guy who gets the narrator to like open up emotionally. He
Yeah.
can cry into him, and
Authentic.
there's this funny thing of like he has bitch tits and all that, and that's like I remember that in the
Well,
book
they're
too. It's
trying
like
so hard to
ridiculous.
emasculate him left and
Yeah.
right because he's not allowed to be an emotional man, you know?
Yep, exactly. But I still think like he adds a lot to that character, where it's like you really like him, and so then when he dies in that scene, it's really heartbreaking, and again, speaking to the ridiculousness of that group think, I think like that really stood out to me this time, where like they're like, bury him in the backyard, and he's like, no, like this is my friend, this is a person,
Yes.
like, and what do? They make it part of their mayhem bullshit, like, oh
Yes.
yes, Robert Paulson, this only through death can you
Do
become
we
a
have a
person,
name?
it's
Yes.
like, no, dude, like you guys have lost the plot, like completely.
Right.
You guys have completely lost the plot. So
Yeah, it's like
that's
only when he dies does he realize that like none of these guys are his friends. Tyler is not his
he's
friend.
alone.
Bob was his only friend, and
Yep.
he's gone now.
Yeah. And then number one, it's got to be, Brad Pitt, Tyler, at
Such
the
a good
end.
one.
And I love that, like, figuring out, he's doing the mental gymnastics, like, if you know which wire it is, then I know which wire it is. And then Brad Pitt, maybe I spent all day thinking of the wrong wire.
Yes, playing with
It's
him.
like- and then that leads to, that gun's not in your hand, it's in my hand. And
Pop.
and then pop, and you see the huge hole out of Brad Pitt. And again, I don't know logistically how that works. I don't, and this is a mental illness. You can't solve it through violence.
Yes, right.
But
Yeah, I think he just needed to imagine that he killed
yeah,
him
I
because
think the
that was the only way to get
metaphor
rid of him.
visually,
Mhm.
it's just a visual metaphor of he had to kill that part of himself, and I think it works
Yes.
really well. And it's really gross at the end when he has this big hole in the side of his
Yes.
neck. And
Yep.
it's okay, Marla.
Who did that to you? I did it.
shout out to Robotine who did the makeup and all this because
Hell yeah.
he's a horror legend and he really makes all the blood and gore and this looks so gross. So
Very gross and very real, right? Like I
yeah.
think the gore is it starts in a place of like kind of harmless. It's just we're getting bloody lips, we're getting black eyes, and then it really like erupts into like Bob's head is gonna let a lot of blood out when they take the
Oh my
mask off, you
god.
know.
Yeah.
His face is gonna be like hanging off of him,
Or Jared
bleeding when he
Leto
does
like
this.
posts the beat up, just having this swollen.
Gnarly looking. Yes, never gonna recover, gonna look like shit forever. His
Yeah.
like teeth, when you can see his
Yeah.
teeth. Oh my god.
That was
So
also another
good.
scene that the censors were really they made him cut down was the Jared Leto fight.
It's gnarly. It truly is gnarly. But yeah, not a lot of deaths in this one, but I do think, you know, like the deaths when they come, they're significant because I think it's easy for him to think, you know, violence and mayhem is just a prank, like you said. But like the reality is it unchecked, it leads to things like this. It leads to
Yeah.
losing someone like Bob who does not deserve to be a casualty in all of this.
Yeah. Definitely.
All right, that takes us to our next segment called Exit Wounds.
Come on, don't bullshit me.
This is where we take a look at the film's imperfections, decide whether they're fatal hits or just minor flesh wounds. What do you got?
I don't really have any. I feel like we
Yeah.
talked about them throughout. And honestly, like, I feel like I don't have a lot of qualms with this movie because I don't think this movie is asking me to take anything
Yeah.
seriously in the wrong way. Like, I really do see it as a satire that shows you what happens when you are a passive person in your own life. And when you blame other people for things, it makes it really easy for you to find yourself in trouble.
Yeah. I would just say um I'm kind of on the same boat, you know. I would say I think they're making a 4K of it, and I would just say my biggest qualm is like, please do a better job on the
Yeah, clean it up.
4K.
Mm-hmm.
Not visually and audio wise, it's great. It's just like the special features. I'm like, these are trash. Like the longest special feature they had on here was like them at this like the Guy Award show on Spike TV where they give them a
Dude.
Fight Club award. Like, okay, Mel Gibson gives them a Fight Club award.
Oh my God. The epitome of misogyny happening here.
It was the only part of that was worth it on that though was when they came up. When they came up, it's Brad Pitt, Edward Norton, and David Fincher, and Brad Pitt goes, "Thanks, sugar tits."
Yes. Wow.
Oh, dude, that was
That's awesome.
that made me laugh really bad.
He's the coolest guy. He's the
But yeah,
fucking
just I
coolest
don't know.
guy.
Whoever did the special features on it, it was just like very frustrating. I'm like, I just wanted like a comprehensive, show me some
Yeah.
behind the scenes shit. You know, I felt like they overcomplicated it. And I guess the other one is like they really don't call this guy by his name ever. You know, because
Yeah,
that
which I
was
never
the
really
hint.
thought about until I was like, oh, he's listed as narrator on the IMDb? Holy shit. I guess they don't
Yeah,
say his
and
name ever.
I mean you know, that's a choice, you know, and it's to keep the twist. But like, you really, if you again, you revisit it, you really notice it that they don't ever until at the very end. He goes, "What's my name?" He tells Marla, you know,
Yeah.
or he tells the guy at the bar, you know, "Who do you think I am?" or whatever. Like, who, and he tells them that. But yeah, it's really throughout. It's like, what have people been calling this guy, especially because he just met Brad Pitt. I guess the one that stood out to me the most this time was like his apartment exploded. He calls Brad Pitt.
Yep.
Brad Pitt calls back and he goes, "Who is this?" And it's like that would be their time to be like, "This is so and so that you just met on the
Yes.
airplane." But then he goes, "Oh, it's the clever guy," you know, like he just
Yeah.
he kind of
Yeah.
brushes it off. So yeah, I mean, it's not unusual for like people that know us, you know, to not call us by our first name, but a lot
But
of the
still,
people in here he's meeting for the first time. I
it's
do love
super
his
clever.
fake names though during the group meetings, like Cornelius, and it's like
Yes.
a lot of those are like Rupert.
So good. So good. Right?
um,
Names that somebody would try out rather than like someone's real name.
yeah, that was about it though.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Again, we can't hold too much against this movie. It's
no,
not trying to do anything more than what it's doing, really.
yeah, and it's because he's
Um,
mentally ill. It's like anything you're trying to poke holes in that. It's like this is coming from an unreliable, mentally ill man. So
From the jump, right? Yes, yes. All right, and that brings us to our last segment called Game Over, Man.
What a picture.
Good picture, yeah.
That is so much fun. I love that stuff, the killing.
A lot of killing.
And finally, this is where we rate the film out of 5 bars of soap. Um, yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious. People who know me, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. I'm gonna give this 5 pink bars. Um, and it's again, we talked about because we talk about action movies, which have some problematic elements sometimes. Um, I think we do a good job of like parsing out just because some movies have complicated legacies and fan bases that take away the wrong lessons doesn't mean I have to love it any less.
Exactly.
It addresses a lot of things that I think are important, like toxic masculinity, cult leaders, mental health, violence, capitalism, and I really admire it still to this day that like it was, it tried going for all of that, and it's definitely a unique film. It's not going to be enjoyed by everybody, as a lot of the reviews. That was like another thing I remember, like some of their ad campaigns back in the day, where they would post negative reviews that critics were writing about them.
That's so awesome.
Like a Tyler would do, like an
Exactly.
anarchist would do. And so yeah, I don't think it's lost any of its power. It's like it's like some of the lines in there where it's just like, yeah, I'd fight Gandhi. I'm like, that's aged pretty well, I'd say. And
Yep.
and just the whole fact of like, Diddy is getting arrested and going through stuff, and it's like that whole thing of like, stop idolizing these celebrities and stuff like that. Just
Yep.
you like their talent or their music or whatever. It's like these
Right.
people you don't know these people. It's like,
Duality is real
yeah.
even if you don't have a dissociative identity disorder.
And like the Starbucks culture is still very strong. Corporate culture, it's probably even
Yep.
worse. It's like he was
Capitalism is all-time
out of
terrible.
control. It's like
Mhm.
he was calling in to order furniture. Now you just put it on you click an app on your phone and you can have whatever you want to
You
your
can view
door.
it in your room and then order
Yeah.
it, like, next level.
So I think a lot of those things, still age really, really well. And just that I really love that message, of just like, yes, we can have these parts of ourselves we don't like, but how we deal with them, it's up to you. You can handle it in these destructive ways and lash out at people in violent ways and shut out the world, or you can deal with it in healthy and productive ways and stuff in ways that make you happy and make other people happy. Like that's my biggest
Totally.
takeaway and what I like about this movie. But yeah, what about you?
I'm also gonna give it a 5 just because I feel like it is, as a whole, done so well, right? It's an
Yeah,
amazing kind of adaptation of a really interesting and confusing kind of book that would be hard to maybe decipher for certain people. And I just feel like visually it finds a way to represent those things. I think I agree it's important to put on display and to try to scrutinize from a satirical standpoint the themes that this movie is going after. And I do feel like, if you're not a person who is maybe one-dimensionally thinking about it, you
yeah,
can see, like we pointed out, that like this is a cautionary tale. This is
yeah.
truly telling you that like if you're passive, if you just let somebody else put words in your mouth, even if that somebody else is another part of your
Hmm.
identity, you'll find yourself in a situation where you have really blown up your own life. And
Yeah, the
I feel
narrator
like
says it at the
that's
end, like it's gone too far. Like, thank you for
yes.
what you've done. This is way past anything
This
I've
is
ever
not what I actually wanted,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And I do feel like that's an important thing for people to reconcile, to be able to understand, because I think people do see themselves in these characters. And of course, when you're like young and naive, maybe you think of that, you think you see something like this and you think they're propping it up. But
Yeah.
I agree. I don't think that's what it
Yeah,
is. And
when
I
the
love
doctor said
rewatching
get
it.
exercise at the beginning, I don't think that's what he was talking about. I don't think a Fight
No,
Club was what he
no.
was talking
N no,
about.
certainly not one that isn't
Yeah.
gonna actually have a kinda culture attached to it. Because, like, even to your point about the UFC stuff, like, outside of the league or whatever, in the gyms where these men are, they're supporting each other. They are there for each other. They are waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning to help each other train. They're not showing up so they can beat the shit out of one another and feel
Yeah.
better about themselves, you know?
And someone who
Like,
is like unhinged like that would get disciplined in a gym like that. You know, and would get talked to and be
yeah,
like, you can't do that, bro. Like that's not what
no.
this is about.
Yeah, get
Yeah.
the hell out of here, you
Yeah.
know? Like you're not going to get to hang with us.
Yeah.
And I think that's it too, is that like the reality is in real life, if you're looking for a sense of self, you can look into traditionally masculine places and still find, emotionally equipped other men that can make you feel seen, that can make
Mhm.
you feel confident and like you belong. And so I appreciate this movie as a cautionary tale, and then just the technical execution. Right? Like I
Mhm.
love Fincher because he is so precise and pristine and technically aware, and
Yeah.
this movie is just a great example of all of his strengths.
Yeah, I think coming in the 90s, I think between this 7 and this, it's like, man, back to back, out of the gate,
Perfect.
masterpiece. It's like,
Perfect.
um, I do like too, like in the main menu when you first boot up Fight Club, the main menu has never been kissed with Drew Barrymore at first.
Amazing. Oh my god, that's so
Again,
good.
Fincher, a lot of it is just like Fincher and all the boys just being like, we're pranksters, like,
Yes, being boys about it.
yeah.
Totally, totally. But it's
So there's
important,
some of that immature humor that it's still funny. I still make
It's
me
so
laugh.
good.
So,
It's so good.
all right, I think that about wraps it up for us. Let's remind the people where they can find us.
Get your fix and follow the show at We Stay Buff on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and on Twitch at The Buffs. And you can follow me on all the socials at It's Me, Shani B.
And so you never miss a rep. Subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please leave a positive review. 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. Follow me on all the socials at misfit_minded and my website, misfitminded.com.
Next week, we'll be back covering Zombieland, which I'm super excited
yeah.
about. Thanks again for listening. We'll hope to catch you next time for another edition of Movie Buffs. Until then.
His name is Robert Paulson. His name is Robert Paulson. His name is Robert